Hello, my name is Thomas. I'm standing here in the CI room at the Dali headquarters, and in this video I would like to introduce the new Dali Phantom Sub S-100 CI subwoofer and the new Dali Phantom AMP-2500 DSP amplifier. The brand new Sub S-100 and AMP-2500 completes our Dali Phantom range by providing a versatile and installation-friendly subwoofer solution for any of our Phantom CI speakers. The addition of these two new products enables Dali to provide a complete custom installation solution to our customers with no restrictions on ease of use or flexibility, or not to mention, of course, exceptional sound quality. This video will dive into the features of the two new products, as well as the technical background and how to set up and use the products. Let's begin with the Phantom Sub S-100. The Sub S-100 is a truly versatile subwoofer that can be used in any situation where a normal high-performance subwoofer would not fit. It allows for easy in-wall mounting. It can be mounted on the wall in the optional Dali on-wall frame, or you can mount it in the on-wall frame on the floor to be placed under your sofa or TV furniture with the supplied rubber feet for the frame. The S-100 has been developed to be an amazing home cinema subwoofer for multi-channel movies or music, or as a slim alternative to a normal subwoofer in a high-performance stereo setup, anywhere from small living rooms to full-blown large home theaters like the one we have here now in our dedicated listening room. So let me grab the subwoofer here. So with an installation depth of only 102 millimeters, the Sub S-100 is an extremely shallow subwoofer that provides a perfect balance between high performance in a slim cabinet and flexibility in placement. The Sub S-100 features an ultra slim cabinet that fits into any standard wall, pretty much any standard wall, and it provides a highly rigid and low resonance enclosure for the bass unit. For the Sub S-100, we use a completely new 10-inch ultra shallow long stroke bass driver that has been developed from the ground up by our in-house engineering team here in Denmark. It has a focus on high power handling and a powerful and precise low-end response, and is of course based on our well-known low-loss sound design principles, which makes the S-100 the perfect partner for any Dali Phantom or any Dali hi-fi speaker, by the way. So this enables us to provide a complete Dali Phantom home cinema, a distributed sound solution, or even a high-end stereo solution with shallow CI subwoofers and dedicated amplification. The Sub S-100 uses a fully closed cabinet, making installation extremely easy, as you don't need to install it into a back box. The speaker is ready for mounting out of the box with no additional accessories needed, which makes it possible to install it in a standard wall without the need for special reworking within the wall. With the included cutout template, it's very easy to cut the correct size hole in the wall. The cabinet is fastened to the wall by using the 8 integrated dog legs. These are high quality dog legs, ensuring firm installation to avoid any rattling as well. They're spring loaded for an easy grip, and they have a reversible clamp as well for gripping walls from 10 millimeters up to 70 millimeters. So, to install the subwoofer, simply connect the speaker cable to the speaker, place the speaker in the mounting hole, and fit by activating the dog legs with the 8 screws in the front, which will tighten the dog legs on the back of the mounting surface. You attach the magnetic front grille, and then you're done. The Sub S-100 is developed to be used with the very powerful external amplifier, the Phantom CI AMP-2500 DSP. The AMP-2500 is a 2x 500 watt amplifier with integrated digital signal processing, or DSP, and it has what we call an amp configurator web interface, allowing you to use it for pretty much any application. It's a true powerhouse of an amplifier based on a Danish-developed Class D amplifier platform, and with two channels of 500 watts in stereo and able to be bridged into a 1000 watt mono amplifier, It has effortless power and extremely high efficiency and ultra-low distortion. This enables us to perfectly match the amplifier to the sub S-100, and the combination of the two in direct development with each other is what gives the Phantom Sub such an impressive performance. Should one subwoofer not be enough, the AMP-2500 can easily handle up to 2 or even 4 S-100s at the same time, enough to fill the largest of rooms. We've been asked a few times whether you can use any amplifier for the sub S-100, and the short answer is we won't recommend using another amplifier than the 2500. The sub S-100 is an external subwoofer designed to be driven by the AMP-2500. Together, they form an active subwoofer system. That means that in order to get the best performance out of the subwoofer, you need to drive with the AMP-2500. When you have a normal active subwoofer, the DSP, the active filters and limiting within the DSP and the amplifier, the DSP and the speaker unit are integrated into the same cabinet. The reason why we use active filters inside a subwoofer amplifier is to compensate for the typical compact cabinet of normal subwoofers. The best way to get an optimum response out of a subwoofer driver is to let the driver decide the enclosure size. So for a 10-inch driver like this one, an optimum closed enclosure would have a volume of around 50 liters. This would make the bass unit have a nice and even frequency response with a soft roll-off into the lowest frequencies. But for the S-100, we needed a very compact enclosure to be able to fit into any standard wall. And going to a smaller enclosure means that the driver will roll off higher up in frequency and would also have an uneven frequency response. So in other words, the subwoofer will not go deep in the bass, and it will sound wrong if it's used with a standard amplifier without any filters or limiting. So to compensate for this, for the small enclosure, we've optimized the AMP-2500 to the sub S-100 using DSP within the amplifier to compensate for the smaller volume. This includes adding the correct active crossover filtering. It's adding limiting as well to protect the driver from overload. So the AMP-2500 and the sub S-100 combination is actually exactly the same as a normal active subwoofer. The only difference is that the subwoofer and the amplifier are separated physically. Although the AMP-2500 is preset from the factory to drive the sub S-100, it can also be configured to be used with other speakers. The AMP-2500 is primarily aimed towards high-end and high-performance home cinema installations, based on products like our M-series or S-series of speakers, and of course the sub 100. But the use cases don't end here. Being a multi-purpose installation amplifier, the AMP-2500 is not only for use in the home cinema, it can also be used for distributed sound around the house, for in-wall or in-ceiling speakers. You can even use it for any of our hi-fi speakers if you wanted to. With the powerful DSP tools built into the amp, you'll have endless possibilities customizing the amplifier to any specific use. Everything is controlled via the amp configurator, which is a web-based interface. You can access this on your Wi-Fi or LAN connection from a computer, a tablet or even a smartphone. So using the AMP-2500 with the sub S-100, you don't have to worry about settings. When you use them together, the amp has been preset from the factory to be plug and play with the subwoofer. We will also be able to provide speaker preset libraries for the Phantom S or Phantom M series of speakers in the near future. These will be downloadable from our website when they're ready. I'll show you how to connect and operate the amplifier a little later in this video. Let's dive into some of the unique technologies of the new sub S-100. All of this information can be found also in our sub S-100 technical paper, which can be downloaded from our website. So, the 10-inch bass driver for the sub S-100 has been developed from the ground up by the Dali engineering team here in Denmark. Instead of just picking an off-the-shelf driver, we chose to develop it ourselves, as this would make us able to heighten the performance significantly. The ultra-shallow driver has been designed from the same principles as the outstanding bass driver used in the Phantom K60 low-profile speaker, allowing the total depth of the speaker to be ultra-shallow, but still maintain a fantastic low-end reproduction. Therefore, we can unite long throw excursion with an ultra-shallow profile, actually by placing the voice coil and the magnet system inside the cone instead of underneath the cone as you would on a normal driver. The cone in the driver is therefore inverted to make the magnet system and the voice coil inside able to be placed within the cone as opposed to being placed below the cone. The driver cone is made from aluminium. The use of aluminium for the membrane was chosen for its extremely stiff construction. We needed this stiffness to avoid any flexing of the membrane while it's playing. Attaching the spider here to the membrane itself instead of on the voice coil former requires tremendous strength, and aluminium was perfect for this application. The S-100 driver has a massive linear working area of up to plus minus 18 millimeters excursion, which ensures the powerful low frequency performance while at the same time being ultra shallow. And with the inclusion of, for example, a large ventilated pole piece in the middle and a voice coil format, that we can ensure that the cone can move freely and even on the high pressure levels. Also using an aluminium shortening ring below the magnet cap, we can linearize the inductance in the voice coil and ultimately lower the distortion in the driver. That's actually something we learned from our Epicon series. So things like these makes the S-100 bass driver able to react to the tiniest details in the music reproduction to the most explosive passages in movies, all with a minimum loss of information and with very low distortion. By adhering to our low-loss design principles, we can make the bass driver fast and responsive, which makes it much better at integrating with the other speakers in the system as a natural extension of the frequency range, instead of just being a rumble box. This makes the Sub S-100 equally suited for high-quality stereo listening or for use in a full-blown multi-channel home theater. Something completely new in the history of Dali and a world's first in an in-house designed driver, we introduce what we call Constant Surface Surround Technology, or CSS. The CSS technology is used in the rubber surround of the driver, and it's a technology that we've co-developed with Purify Audio from Denmark. CSS technology offers quite a few improvements on the Sub S-100 driver, resulting in overall lower distortion, a longer linear excursion, and lower self-resonance. The main challenge with a traditional rubber suspension is something called surround radiation distortion, which happens in the rubber surround of the cone when it moves inwards and outwards along with the driver cone. So when the cone is pulled inwards, the effective radiating surface area of the cone and the surround increases. And when the cone is pushed outwards, the radiating surface area decreases, and this is a direct contributor to distortion. This is especially true for a driver pushed into the excursion extremes, like the one we have here, the Sub S-100 driver. Constant surface surround technology has a physical form that's very different from a conventional rubber surround. The CSS surround technology uses a special geometry of alternating positive and negative regions, and this custom developed geometry keeps the surround modulation to a minimum, effectively eliminating surround radiation distortion significantly. Because of this geometry, the surface of the surround is always constant, no matter the position of the diaphragm or the membrane. CSS technology adds several benefits to our subwoofer driver. It practically eliminates surround and cone modulation. The surround and cone also have a larger linear working area. It has better control of the cone and surround resonances, and it's also more resilient against back pressure behind the driver, which in the case of the Sub S-100 is very relevant because of the small cabinet volume. So all of these things results in significantly lower distortion from the driver while keeping a long excursion and a powerful low frequency performance. The CSS technology marks a significant advance in driver design and performance that we at Dali are excited and proud to be the first to introduce to an in-house manufactured subwoofer driver. Constructed in thick MDF, the cabinet is designed with a careful eye on getting the thickness solid enough not to resonate, yet thin enough to allow for the precise inner volume of only 9 liters. The Sub S-100 shares the outer frame and baffle with the Sub S-80 speaker, but the cabinet for the Sub S-100 is quite different. The inner bracings of the cabinet has been reinforced both in thickness and where they attach to the baffle. Instead of just attaching the driver into the front baffle, letting its rear float inside the cabinet, the driver is attached both to the front baffle and the inner bracings and the back side of the cabinet. The cabinet and driver therefore act as a whole with no buildup of unwanted energy due to the enormous strength of the construction. But it also makes the driver much better at transferring its energy into the room. On the back of the amplifier, you will find the physical input and output connections. Here we have 4 analog inputs with RCA connectors and also 4 balanced input with Euroblock connectors. There's a stereo SPDIF input for connecting a digital source and a stereo SPDIF output for daisy chaining to more amplifiers to the same source. Over here we have the 2 speaker outputs, also on Euroblock connectors. In the left side we have the 2 network options, one LAN cable for hardwiring the amplifier to your home network and a wireless antenna for the wireless connection, a Wi-Fi antenna. Up here we have the GPIO, the general purpose input-output connector, which enables you to add or customize external control functions to the amplifier, such as a volume control or mute functions or even trigger functions. I'll show you this in the AMP configurator in just a minute. So once your Sub S-100 has been installed in your preferred location, it's time for connecting it to the amplifier. As I told you before, the amplifier is configured from the factory to drive the Sub S-100 subwoofer. Therefore, standard input configuration sends channel 1 input to both speaker output channels. This will enable the amplifier out of the box to drive 1 to 4 Sub S-100s with a mono LFE signal into channel 1. So connect your line level signal from your AV receiver or surround sound processor into channel 1 input. Next up, connect your subwoofer speaker cables with the Euroblock connector to the speaker output channel 1 or channel 2. It doesn't matter if you're using speaker output 1 or 2, both of them are getting the same signal. Finally, power up the amplifier on the front and you're good to go. If you want to customize your subwoofer channel, we recommend that you do this in your AV receiver or your surround processor. If you want to use the AMP-2500 for stereo speakers, this can be configured manually in the AMP configurator web interface. Alright, so let me show you how to connect your laptop PC to the AMP configurator web interface in the amplifier. The first thing you're going to do is to power up the amplifier. On the front we have several LEDs where you have a LED for power and you have one that says Wi-Fi. As soon as that Wi-Fi LED lights up, it's broadcasting its own Wi-Fi network which I can connect to with my laptop. So next thing you're going to do is to go into your Wi-Fi settings and look for the Wi-Fi of the Dali Phantom 2500. It's already here, Dali 2500, and then it's called the serial number. Then you have to press the password, and that's conveniently password with small letters. So P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D, password, and then we say next. It's connecting to the amplifier, and then you have to type in the IP address for the amplifier in your browser. So as soon as it's connected, you go to your browser and type in the standard IP address. The standard IP address is 192.168.4.1. Put that into your browser and press enter, and then we're connected to the AMP Configurator web interface. I'll show you how to operate this just in 1 second. Okay, so now we have been connected into the AMP Configurator of the AMP-2500 DSP. The AMP Configurator is a web-based interface, which means that I can connect to it with a laptop computer like I'm using here, with a smartphone, with a tablet, anything that's connected to the same network as the amplifier or connected to the amplifier's own Wi-Fi network. So the first thing we see on the front page, the dashboard of the amplifier, is a status on the power input and output. We can see no signal is coming in right now. We have status on the LAN IP addresses or the Wi-Fi IP addresses. And then we have volume control for zone A and zone B, which is the kind of main volume. So if you want to adjust the volume of the amplifier, the master volume is controlled from here. Other than that, we have 4 tabs besides from the dashboard, where you can control the input, the zone, the output, and general settings. If we go to the input tab, this one relates to the physical inputs on the back of the amplifier, which means that we have 4 inputs, channel 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have an SPDIF input control, and then we actually have an internal noise generator that we can turn on and assign to an output if we want to do a pink noise in a certain speaker to kind of maybe locate it, or even do EQing of a speaker like that. Channel 1 is called left or LFE, which is the one you will use when you connect with the subwoofer. So standard, this input is being routed to both the speaker outputs. I'll show you that in just a second. On the input page, you can do sensitivity on each input, or you can do gain or trim of that input terminal. In this instance, we've preset the amplifier for use with the sub S-100, so you don't need to do anything here. Going to the next tab in the settings is what we call zone, and you will have 2 zones to play with in this amplifier, zone A and zone B. You can rename these if you'd like. So we could call zone A, we could call that sub S-100 if you like, just to make things clear. Which means that now the zone A is taking its source or the primary input from channel 1. So channel 1 will go into zone A and go from zone A to the desired outputs of the amplifier. In the zone tab, you can do volume control, so you can do minimum and maximum volume, or you can do external control if you want to use an external potentiometer, for example, in the general purpose input-output port on the back. This is also where you control that here. If you want, you can also add a compressor to your zone. So if you want to control the audio levels to a certain degree, you can use the compressor as well. For controlling the outputs, the speaker outputs, that is, so in this instance, it's a 2-channel amplifier, so we have output channel 1 and output channel 2. These are the physical speaker outputs on the back. You can do gain adjustment here if you'd like. You don't have to do this if you're using the subwoofer. It's already been set to fit the subwoofer. But down here in the routing options, you can see that now we are taking the signal from what we called zone A, or renamed to sub S-100. So that means that everything coming from zone A will go to output channel 1, and everything coming from zone A will go to output channel 2. This is very convenient because that means with a mono signal from your LFE output on your AV receiver or processor, you can drive both output channels on the amplifier, which means that with one input on the amp, you can drive up to 4 sub S-100s with one amplifier. In the output section, you can also do delay compensation. You can do a master EQ on each output, channel 1 or channel 2. And it's also here you find the speaker preset options. As you can see in the speaker preset tab, the speaker preset is already been set to the Phantom Sub S-100, which means that from the factory, the amplifier has been optimized with filtering, with limiting, with volume control, input sensitivity, everything that we can do from our engineering point of view to optimize the amplifier for use with the Sub S-100. We strongly recommend that you use the AMP-2500 for the Sub S-100, because using any other amplifier, you won't get the correct filtering, the correct limiting. So that means that you won't get the correct sound out of the subwoofer, but you can also risk damaging the subwoofer if you use another amplifier. Going to the Settings tab, I have also the options to do system information, so I can put in tags on, for example, date of installation, installer name, so I have that installed in the amplifier. I have device information, serial number, MAC address, Wi-Fi MAC address. You can do firmware updating when we release new firmware for the amplifier. You can do that here as well. There's a backup and restore function, so you can restore it to the factory settings, but you can also back up your settings. If you, for example, have done custom EQ or custom presets, you can save that into a file and put that on your computer. In here, we also have the speaker library, which relates to the speaker presets. I'll tell you about this in just a second. Security options, you can password enable the amplifier. You can do power management. For example, should the amplifier do auto on control with audio or with triggering? You can do standby time, mute time. There's the general purpose input-output functions, so you can externally trigger the amplifier to do certain things, do volume control up and down. You can do triggering functions as well. And you also have a LAN and a Wi-Fi settings tab, which lets you set a password for the Wi-Fi, for example, or you can do DHCP or static IP address, something like that. Going back to the speaker presets, as I told before, the speaker has been preset for the Sub S-100. If I wanted to change that and perhaps use the amplifier as a normal stereo amplifier for any of our CI speakers, I can clear that preset, and then the amplifier will be set as a normal 2-channel stereo amp, which means I don't have any filtering on the outputs. I don't have any limiting on the outputs. I can actually go in and configure the preset any way I would like and save that to be used on the speaker outputs. That means I can do crossover. I can do a certain speaker EQ for any of output channel 1 and 2. I can do FIR filter alignments, driver alignments, polarity, limiting, or even change the output mode if I want to drive, for example, 70 volts or 100 volt speakers, or if I want to bridge the two outputs into one mono channel, I can do that here as well. So whenever I've done all my settings in my speaker preset, I can export that preset to a file if I want, and save that on my computer. And then afterwards, I can import that file into the speaker library on the amplifier. Let me show you what that means. So if I go into settings and speaker library, you'll see that I've made a library here called Phantom S. If I edit that library, I'll see that in the Phantom S library, there is a product called Phantom Sub S-100, which means that if you ever lose your preset or do some changes in the amplifier that you regret, you could always go back to the Sub S-100 preset from the speaker library by going to Output, Speaker Preset, and then Select Preset from Library. Here you'll see that the Sub S-100 preset is sitting right there. If I want to load that preset on my speaker outputs, I press Use Selected, and we're back to the factory preset where I came from. You can also do this, go back to the factory settings by going to Settings, Backup and Restore, and then say Reset, which means that you can reset your amplifier to factory standards, which will load the Sub S-100 preset and have everything ready to drive the subwoofer. Now I would like to give you an example on how to use the AMP-2500 as a stereo amp to drive a pair of S-280 speakers. So first thing you want to do is to go to the Input tab. The Input tab right now is set to be a sensitivity of +4 dBu, which is fine. And we set the gain for 0 decibels, which is also fine. Here we have channel 1 and channel 2, the left and the right input channel. In order to make the amplifier a stereo amp, next up, you go to the zone. What you would do here is that you would set zone A to take its primary input from channel 1, and you would set zone B to take its primary input from channel 2, right. That means we have a zone A that carries the left channel, and we have a zone B that carries the right channel through the amplifier. You don't have to do anything with volume control at this point. Now we need to set the output channels. So on the output routing function, we can tell the output channel 1 where it should get its input from. And in this instance, we should get input from zone A to output channel 1, and for output channel 2, we should set the input to zone B, which means that the left and the right channel will go through the amplifier with zone A and B to output 1 and 2. Now the amplifier is a stereo amp, left input going to left output and right input going to right output. So the only thing we need to do now is to go into Speaker Preset and remove the Sub S-100 preset that's been built in from the factory. Okay, so now I would like to show you how to create a speaker preset of your own and how to save it on the speaker library in the amplifier. First thing you'll do is to go to Output and then Speaker Preset. Right now it says no speaker preset loaded because I cleared the preset that was on there from the factory, the S-100 preset. So now I got a whole new bunch of options here, which I can build my own speaker preset. So let's just say I want to connect a certain pair of speakers. Let's say it's a pair of S-280 speakers, and I would like to do a custom EQ for them. So I like bass, so I'll put on some extra bass, and I like a little bit less mid-range, maybe a little bit more top end. This is my custom EQ for the S-280s. Just make sure that you copy that EQ to both channels so that it works on both channel left and right. We can do all sorts of other things, but just for now, let's just save this speaker EQ as a preset. So what I'll do first is to go back to Speaker Preset. I'll say Export Preset to File. And because I've only done Speaker EQ or Crossover, I'll just export those two settings. I'll call the preset S-280 Custom and save that, export that to my computer. If I wanted to protect those settings, that means that after you load the preset again, you won't be able to further adjust those settings. They'll be locked. That's the way we did the S-100 that's preset into the amplifier. We locked that to the settings that our engineers done, because then it's easy. You just have to load it and it works perfectly with the S-100. In this instance, just for demonstration purposes, let's keep them open and export that preset onto my hard drive. In this instance, my desktop. Just press save to there. What I can do now is that I can go into my speaker library within settings, speaker library. Here I already have a library called Phantom S. So now I want to add the S280 custom to that library. This means that you can always find the correct preset on the amplifier when you connect, no matter what you connect with. So I'll press the Phantom S100 library. I'll say import file, and then I'll choose my speaker file, which was the S280 custom, and press import. Now the sub S100 preset is in there, and the S280 custom preset is also in there. I'll press update and go back to output, speaker preset, and then I will load the preset from the library. So I press select preset from library, and here is the new preset I've loaded onto the amplifier. You select it, and now our speaker preset is the S280 custom that we just made. I can choose to customize the preset if I want to, because I left it open, or if I want to go back to the preset that we did from the S100, I can choose to say clear preset, import preset from library, and then choose the S100 instead. So very simple. You build your preset, you export it to your PC for backup purposes, and then you download it or input it into the speaker library, where you will always be able to find it again as a part of the amplifier setup. So that's pretty much it. I urge you guys to try and load the AMP configurator. Play around with the settings. It's not so difficult. It has a lot of settings, and some of them you might not ever use, but it's a nice way of configuring, if you want to do your own configuration of your system. If you use the sub S100, I would recommend that you don't change anything in the amplifier, but do all of your settings from your AV receiver or your surround processor on the LFE channel.